Being a band director has been one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. But even on the good days, let's face it, being an educator isn't always easy. And there's no way I could have made it this far without the great advice, words of encouragement, and at times the tough love of some really wonderful mentors. If you find yourself needing those same things, or you just want to learn some strategies that will help you become a more effective music teacher, then you've come to the right place. Welcome to the Band Office. Hi there, I'm your host, Andrew Jemison. On this episode, we'll be discussing relationships with school administrators and how important those are to the success of our programs. Joining us this week is Mr. Tripp Aldredge, principal of Fort Dorchester High School in North Charleston, South Carolina, and Mr. Scott Strickler, principal of Brevard High School in Brevard, North Carolina, which also happens to be the school where I teach. Gentlemen, thank you for being here with us.
Thanks for having us.
Certainly.
All right. If you don't mind, would each of you take just a moment and tell our listeners a little bit about your educational background and your experiences specifically with band? Scott, why don't you go first?
Well, Andrew, this is my 20th year in education. I'll start with my experience in band. I remember going into Mr. Heron's band room as a wily sixth grader, getting handed a trumpet. I played that for, a year. And then he wisely said, yes, we're going to change instruments now. And he handed me a baritone. And from 7th grade through 12th grade, I played baritone. And I was really privileged my last 3 years of high school to be at Dobbins Bennett High School in Kingsport, Tennessee, where Leif Cook is still the band director there as of today. Really enjoyed it and spent a lot of time playing. Probably Director Cook would have liked me to play a little bit more, but I had experiences at regionals, at states, went to New Orleans, marched all over the Southeast, and just really enjoyed it. Really, it was a big struggle when I went into college. My private tutor, his name was Greg Holland. He was my church organist. He taught me private lessons, and he had a really wide breadth of musical taste that he would share lots of CDs with me, and just really expanded my own personal musical knowledge. So when I was going into college at App, I really struggled between band major or music major and education. And I just had some really formative high school social studies teachers, Mr. Austin, Mr. Galway at Dobbins Bennett, that just really pushed me into going the educational route. So once I finished up at App, I taught a semester at Pisgah High School. Really enjoyed that. I thought I wanted to stay in Asheville, but sometimes the world has different plans for you. Ended up at Roswell Middle School teaching 6th, 7th, or 8th grade, wherever I was at during the year that the principal put me at, teaching science and social studies. Got into it. Actually started talking to principals and enjoying administration and what that was. Became assistant principal of Brevard Middle, moved on and became principal at Rosman Elementary, became principal at Rosman Middle School, and now I've graduated to high school. So I'm now here at Brevard High School.
Well, I, for one, am certainly glad that you are our principal at Brevard High School and think you're doing a fantastic job there. So thank you for...
I will pay you later.
You do sign my check, I suppose. Sorry, you went to Dobbins Bennett and studied with Leif Cook. What a great experience. That is a name that is certainly well known in North Carolina, and I'm sure many other places. I can remember hearing about Dobbins Bennett as a young music ed major at ASU.
I think people all over the country know who Leif Cook is.
Oh, yeah, definitely. All right, Tripp, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So, like Scott, my formative years were in my junior high school band program. Came to figure out early in high school that I probably wanted to be a musician. Definitely not a teacher, but a musician. So planned to head off to school. I went to East Carolina University, studied percussion there with Mark Ford. Had some great experiences, just really preparing as an all-around musician. When I got ready to graduate, I had my sights set on moving to Nashville to work for Innovative Percussion, which
Hmm.
was a fledgling company at the time. And I was talking to the president of the company at that time about going out. But I had worked a marching band camp for this lady named Alice Adkins at Scotland High School. And Scotland High School is in Laurinburg, North Carolina. And I had done their band camp for 2 years with their marching band. They had played at the state convention, and I helped out, was teaching. It's a really great place. She was super supportive and had a great program, good support there in the district. And, I told her, really my ideal job would have been to go somewhere like Texas where I could be a percussion specialist. I had kind of warmed up a little bit to teaching. I didn't really want to be a band director, I didn't think, but warmed up to teaching, maybe percussion and being the performer. And so lo and behold, she did some digging, and Scotland County Schools was able to create a position for me as a percussion specialist. We had 4 middle schools and 1 high school. I spent 1 day of the week at each of those schools, rotating around, and then of course worked with the marching band. I did a jazz ensemble at the high school, conducted the musical theater, and really fulfilling experience. And so after 2 years there as the percussion specialist, Paul Jackson, a name that some people might know in North Carolina. Paul Jackson was our assistant band director, and Paul got his first head director job and was leaving right before band camp. And at this point, Alice and I had started dating. And I said, "Well, honey, I don't know what we're going to do about an assistant director." And she said, "I do. You're going to be the assistant director." And so, as her fiance, I dutifully said yes, ma'am, and I became the associate director. We promoted the position to associate director of bands, and that's where I got my start band directing there. We then went on to Croatan High School, where we team taught together. We left a great situation in Scotland County to go there, where we knew we would control the feeder school and the high school. We team taught the middle school feeder and the high school program. In a 2A high school, we had a national caliber band. We put about 60% of the band in district band and all state each year. Wildly popular. We had a band of the day at the essentially Ellington Regional Jazz Festival in Chapel Hill. Our winter guards were winning medals at WGI. We were winning regionals as class champions and placing at Grand Nationals in the A class at Bands of America. So really fun time during those years. But eventually came to realize that I was going to need to do something else to support the lifestyle we wanted to have. We were thinking about having children. And so I went to the dark side and moved to administration. But I was lucky at that time that my principal at Croatan High School, Matt Bottoms, was a former band director. He had hired us to be the band directors, and so he completely understood, and even more so, he understood moving into administration from the band job. And so he brought me on as an assistant principal. We traversed across the state and worked in Cabarrus County for a while, and then 5 years ago, we made the move to South Carolina. We live in Summerville, South Carolina, where our son Grayson is in the Summerville High School band. He is first chair in the state alto saxophone for the 3rd year this year. Just made all-state jazz on tenor sax, and he'll be performing at their Music Educators Conference on their solo performance. So really proud of what he's doing and enjoying being band parents at this point. So I feel like that gives me a unique perspective because I now have 15 years in school administration, and I've got almost 17 years now as a parent, band parent, and also have been a band director. So I can talk about all the angles there.
Yeah, I see some things online on social media that you guys post. He's doing really well for himself.
Yeah, we're super proud.
Yeah, I've recently stepped into that world of being a band parent myself. I have a middle schooler who is a percussionist. It certainly makes you appreciate and understand that different perspective that a band parent has.
And a middle schooler and a percussionist.
Right.
It's 3 strikes right now. I promise it will get better.
Oh, man, do I hope so. All right. Well, thanks for sharing a little bit about yourselves with our audience. Okay, our topic for this episode is about building healthy working relationships with school administrators and learning to understand their unique perspective of the education world. I'm sure we've all heard stories or had experiences of teachers not getting along with their administrators or even leaving the profession because of bad working relationships with their principals. I specifically remember a teacher during my second year of teaching who sat next to me at the very first faculty meeting of the year and just badmouthed the superintendent and the high school principal the entire time. Her advice to me was get out now before it's too late. And if you're going to stick with it, just remember you'll outlive the terrible principal. Now, 4 weeks later, she was gone. I don't know whether she chose to retire early or whether she was asked to leave, but either way, she left the profession rather than working out her differences and seeing the issues through someone else's eyes. So tonight we're here to do just that. We're going to discuss how we can better understand our administrators and hopefully share some advice on how to resolve issues that may arise. So let's jump into some questions. As an administrator, what do you consider your greatest responsibility? And I think I know the answer that both of you will probably give is the safety and welfare of your students and your staff. I hope that's what every person in education considers to be their main goal. So looking beyond that, though, what would you consider to be that second most important thing?
I'm going to say for me, it's hiring of new staff. I mean, you can really create something that is incredible with the hiring of a new staff member or a set of new staff members, or you can unintentionally set in place some really hard situations for students, fellow educators, and administrators. I had the fortune when I was at Roswell Middle School to hire a music teacher whose name is Hazel Ketchum, who, when she came into the interview, we were like, this lady is incredible. She talked about, playing the lute, teaching kids in a rural setting how to like play traditional bluegrass music. She talked about being in a rock band, but then she'd turn around and tell how she has run like children's choirs before. And so, hiring her, I guess 3 or 4 years ago at this time, and just my conversations with her about how she's really changed the culture of the importance of music at both Roswell Middle and Roswell High School, because she works at both schools, has been pretty amazing to the whole school. I mean, it's pretty neat when you can see a teacher walk around with a lute and, serenade kids going down the hall and they're into it. She's really done a lot to change that culture. I mean, I'm sure that both Tripp and I, as administrators, could talk about those hires we wish we could go back and take, but I really try not to dwell on those folks, because sometimes just a different location really can help people. And sometimes, that lady who you were sitting beside at the staff meeting really probably wasn't built for teaching in the long run, because this is not for the faint-hearted. And when you find people you want to work with, like, you want to work with them. I know when working for a principal who I feel he just gave out cookies, like literally that's all he did. I was always amazed at how like he didn't know kids' names or that, and it was just a business to him and not a. He thought he would get enough brownie points literally by handing out brownies, and he and I had some philosophical differences that really helped guide me via the principal I am today.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, so I would piggyback here. I think Andrew, you hit the nail on the head. Obviously, want to make sure everybody goes home in as good or better condition every day than they came to us at school. We want to make sure everyone's safe. And then Scott, absolutely, probably our most important job in administration is our responsibility for hiring the right people. And as they talk about getting the right people on the bus, and so that's a big thing. Put a lot of energy into that. To give an additional perspective. One of the things I remember, and I mentioned Matt Bottoms, the administrator that brought me to the dark side. But one of the things I can remember when I was still in the classroom working for Matt is that I felt like Matt always had time for me. His door literally was always open. I could go to him with anything. He'd stop by my classroom and check in. And I can remember learning from him as I went into administration. I remembered what that felt like as a teacher to know that I was completely supported, that my administration was available to me, and I could go to them. And I wanted to do, I'll date myself here, but if a teacher needed dry erase markers, I'm not too important to run and get the dry erase markers and deliver them to that classroom. The teachers are where the rubber meets the road. They are there with the students, which are our most important commodity is not the right word. They're not a commodity, but that's what we're all about is the students and what they're gaining in their education. And so the teachers are really literally where the rubber meets the road on the front line. And I have to support that and do anything in my power to remove barriers and obstacles. And I've kind of learned over time. I tell my staff at my school that the jobs I want them to focus on are um, creating and teaching fantastic lessons. And I added that creating part because I think you have to put some work into your plan and design for what you're doing. I used to just leave that out. You just got to teach great lessons. But I found out that sometimes people didn't prepare appropriately for that. So I want to prepare and teach great lessons. And I'm going to remember everything else I can. I often say that I try to be a yes man. When somebody comes to me and my goal is to be able to say yes to that. I want to be able to give them what they're looking for and what they need. And I think you can flip that script as well as a teacher. If we're looking at people that may be listening to this podcast that are teachers right now, you can apply that same principle as a teacher. Can you be that go-to person for your colleagues on the staff, for your administrators? Administrators take a beating a lot of times, especially assistant principals. They can take a real beating, and nothing means more to me than when one of my staff members wants to check in on me or check in on another administrator in the school and make sure it's okay, or just being there. I know specifically we start talking about band directors, and it's a lot to be a band director, and we hate doing a parade, and we'd rather not do the pep rally, and there's just some, and can we just play the Star Spangled Banner from the stands instead of going out on the field? There's all of these things that band directors are going to want to do or say, but if the principal doesn't have to worry, if they know that you ask for, if as a principal I ask for this and my band director says absolutely I'm going to do that, that takes away my worry. I'm no longer worried what my band director is going to do. I'll go fight with my football coach because he's not going to listen. But that's just a joke. But
Right.
That's kind of where that goes. Is you want to think about where people are coming from, be there to help. It's basically expanding on the golden rule, but that's huge. And I think if you really focus on that and realize, are you being a giver or a taker in your role and what you do? If you can always be there and always support, if you can try to always make your answer yes, let me figure out how I can make that happen for you. People are going to appreciate that and look to then bring favor to you when they have that opportunity.
All right, very good. So the next question, how do you gain the confidence and trust of your teachers and staff, and how can those teachers gain the same from you?
So I would say that a big thing for me that I think my staff appreciates is consistency. And I'm in a very large school. I've got 2,300 students. We have 8 administrators, 9 guidance counselors, 2 SROs, 2 additional security. I got a lot of support staff helping in that school. And sometimes we mess up, and as a group, it's hard for us to be consistent across that number of people. But we are very transparent and honest about the fact that we are trying to be consistent. And I want people to know what to expect when dealing with situations. I try to always support a teacher when dealing with a parent or student situation. That teacher has my support, and if the teacher, in fact, appears to maybe have not made the right choice or could have done something differently, I'm going to support that teacher, and then we'll have a conversation privately afterwards about what could we have done differently, or you really kind of put me in a situation here, but I want to make sure that I have that support, and I think that sets that up is that I'm always there in their corner and covering that and building that trust with consistency and support.
Great answer, Tripp. I agree with all those points. I'd throw in my 2 cents. And Andrew, I hope you've seen this a little bit this year, as this is my first year at Brevard High School. For me, it begins with listening and observing, and just implicitly trusting your people. I had, before I came to Brevard High School, since I'd been in the county for nearly 20 years, everyone would fill my ear about all these wonderful, or sometimes the opposite, things that educators at this school had done. And I was kind of like, I would like to see this in action. That's why over the summer I really attempted to meet with every staff member and just say, can you tell me what our school's about? I just need to know. And when I hope you never feel, Andrew, when I come into the band room, I'm never going to sit there and go, oh, well, I could do this better. I mean, I don't do that in math classrooms. There's not a classroom in the building, even if, I'm licensed in that subject. I think that there are classrooms I walk in to go, all right, look, I need to help this person with this, whether it's management or planning or, just general rapport with students. But that's a partnership. That's not a dictatorship, because
Right.
unless somebody is just being unethical, immoral, or just plain out illegal, which has happened so infrequently in my career, I can't think of an example. Like, we need to give teachers the authority to teach and do what they do and what the college do and do great at. And if they're not doing it, light the spark again with them. And it's a journey with them. It's not a journey to them. And that's often very difficult, because lots of times the folks that need the fire rekindled really may not want to stay up all night and keep it going.
Yeah.
To use a poor analogy, but I think that's kind of the hardest part. So I mean, I don't walk in somebody's classroom with some hoity-toity attitude that well, I've got a master's degree, I'm obviously smarter than you. Incorrect. I guarantee if I walked in and you were teaching the flute section how to play, I'm not having a brother. I'm not even gonna touch that one. I remember those times I've tried to play a flute, and it's comical. And that's same for me. But then that's what I expect the teachers is if I say, hey, I need you to do something. It's a conversation. It's a dialogue. There are
Right.
occasions when I'll say, hey, we need to do this. I mean,
Right.
you've seen that when it's come down to stuff like safety, or when I'm saying, setting up routines that may or may not have been here before with lesson planning or grading. But, I hope that I gathered enough trust from like listening and not coming in overturning the apple cart to the teachers overwhelmingly have seemed to do that.
Right. Well, I think you both hit on two really great things that are so important, both of which I've had some issues with previous administrators throughout my career, and that is the support and the trust. I had a principal at one point early on in my career, and I don't mean for this to turn into an administrator bashing session by any means, but I had a principal early on in my career that basically said to me, you're the professional. I'm going to trust you to do what you need to do in your classroom and with the band program. And then it ended up that he didn't really do that. And it was kind of questioning everything I did and almost micromanaging everything I did in some form or fashion. And Tripp, you talked about support and just being in the classroom. I think that's really important for teachers to see their administrator not only when things are negative, not only when there's something bad that happens, which is what happened to me a lot in my past is, that I only saw the administrator when there was a problem, when there was a student that was in trouble. The students didn't see the administrator come in the classroom to praise them in any way. They just got a superior at MPA, or some students just performed a small ensemble performance at the local Rotary Club. It's just great to hear that affirmation and that assurance from the administrator. You're doing a great job as a student, and it's also good for the teacher to hear that.
Andrew, can I circle back and frame something
Sure.
that Scott said? He talked about coming in as a new administrator and meeting with all the staff and finding out what they liked and what they wanted, and I think that's important, for band directors to consider, twofold. If you have a new administrator coming to your building and they offer that opportunity, which many times that's the case now, you absolutely must take that opportunity and
Mm-hmm.
meet with that principal. And likewise, if you are interviewing for another job, a new job, and looking, you need to be interviewing the principal just as much as they interview you.
Right.
I think it may be a little unfair here as you talk to me and Scott and our backgrounds with band and our understanding maybe of what's happening. The unfortunate truth is there are some administrators that just don't have an understanding. They didn't have the experience when they were coming up, and they don't really know what we're doing in the band room. And I'm not, again, not bashing anyone, but what we do in a band room is very complex, as complex or more complex than maybe what happens in some other classrooms. Certainly as complex, and it's difficult, and you need to know what you're dealing with your administrator. Does your administrator truly understand, or does your administrator need you to help them understand? And what can you lay out to set that up? You mentioned congratulating the students for making a superior at MPA. It's important as a band director that you teach your principal that MPA is your EOG or your EOC for your class, and they absolutely make a big deal for the entire school about that testing and how important the state testing is. Well, this is just as important, and they should be on that bus or at least meeting you at the site and seeing you. I've not missed an MPA performance for any of my bands, in the entire time I've been a principal, because it's a huge deal, and I want to be there to celebrate those students and how hard they worked. In my current role, we have a state championship in South Carolina for marching band, and the Friday before the state championship, we always have pancakes with the principal, and they come in, and I have the cafeteria prepare breakfast, and we have breakfast with the marching band, and I remind them that I was out there in the summer when they were at band camp, and I know how hard they worked, and I've seen the sacrifices they've made and how hard they have poured into this until November. And I'm there to support that. And I know to do that because of my history. But if I didn't know, I think most principals that just don't understand would welcome somebody telling them and making them understand so they could be there and do that. Principals like to get to celebrate the good stuff because all the bad stuff lands at our feet.
That's right. Yeah.
For the good moments,
Right.
Well, and Tripp, I know I've mentioned this to Andrew multiple times. The things that go on in band, whether it's during the day or after school or at competition or on the football field, that is just as important to those kids as any other activity. I know that every school has its, specialized activities that can be lauded higher than others, but for that kid sitting there playing clarinet in the band room at Brevard High School, that's the thing that keeps them in school. That's the thing that they wake up and go, nice, I get to go play today. Like I get to go play this new piece with the band, or you know what, on this Tuesday night, I get to go perform for our community. And if we don't encourage those things and we have that narrow focus on one or two extracurriculars, we're missing out on a whole lot of kids and a whole lot of families and their reason why they come to school.
That's exactly right. Absolutely. Tripp, you touched on this just a little bit, and it leads perfectly into our next question. How can I, as a band director, help to educate my principal about what a healthy band program should look like?
I would couch that in growth terms. Andrew, you and I have talked about, growing the numbers of the band and how you are seeing some success and dipping into the middle school and growing that program and how that's then going to grow the numbers in your program. I would hope that most people at this point, since music, in my opinion, is pretty much a universal language, I hope that through their ears they can also hear that growth. I remember earlier in the year when Brevard Middle School came over and performed before Brevard High School's band and concert band, and that was a pretty stark contrast: the sixth grade band to the seventh and eighth grade band to the high school ensemble, and then that greater high school ensemble. And I mean, it was a pretty clear delineation, and utter novice to those students that have been playing for a good bit of their middle and high school career. There was a marked difference in the musical performance, the difficulty, and the tone of the pieces as well. And I think that hopefully any principal, whether they were in the band or still have musical interest, or they just really enjoy watching a good James Cameron film that with a great score, that they can hear that progression from bands and band members that are novices and beginners to those that are becoming elite and have future careers in music.
So I would offer this, and it may sound a bit like a commercial, but Scott Rush is a good friend of mine. And I remember just before I left the profession, I got one of the early spiral bound copies of his book, The Habits of Highly Successful Band Director. And I would tell anybody that's listening to this that has not read Scott's book, it's probably in its third or fourth edition now. Um,
Hmm.
it is a fabulous book, and he actually gives pointers in the book about what you just asked. How would you educate your administrator, maybe that doesn't know? I can
Right.
remember one of the appendices in the book was just a list of all the things that the band director does in a year. And it was single space type list that went on for, I don't know, 30, 40 pages. And I think, somebody that didn't understand or didn't have that background to see that and compare that to maybe what they did when they were a math teacher or a history teacher or whatever, I think it's mind blowing to understand where that is and what you're doing in terms of building a program, not just teaching a class, but building a program in the
Right.
school. And Scott touched on the vertical alignment from middle school up through the high school, and I mean it's much bigger than what many teachers come to school and focus on. And I'm not in any way belittling what they do, but their focus is what they're doing that semester usually in high school in their classroom, and they're going to rinse and repeat and do that again the next semester when they teach probably those same classes again. And it's just not like that at all for band. Scott's book does a great job of laying that out, helping you explain that. And I would say that'd be a great place and great tool to help you really find that time. Make an appointment, maybe offer to take the administrator to lunch, or if they got ball game duty that night,
Hmm.
say, hey, you staying for the ball game? How about I pick us up some burgers and can we sit and chat for a while before the game starts or between the games or whatever? Get an opportunity where you're not pressuring them, where you just have time to talk and let them know you need some time. We're rambling on tonight, and I imagine we'll speak for an hour easily tonight. So how can you get that time administrator and just really talk about it? And I imagine that any of your guests that are listening to this podcast are going to be passionate and can just go on and on about this if they get started. um, you
Right.
know and so that I would say that'd be great advice to get them going with training up their administrator.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that Scott Rush book. He has several there.
Oh
The
yeah.
Habits of a Successful Band Director, Habits of a Significant Band Director. There's a middle school version. There's one for chorus and orchestra as well. And they are just fantastic resources. Yeah, if you haven't, as Tripp said, looked at those, definitely order them, take a look at them, read them, take notes. Lots of good stuff. Well, let's take a moment to talk about the responsibilities of the band director, as you mentioned there, Tripp, um, specifically beyond the classroom. I've made these lists before for principals, and I think as a pre-service teacher who's in an undergraduate program right now training to be a band director, I think it's really important for you to understand exactly what responsibilities that you're going to have beyond just the everyday the classroom responsibilities or the conducting responsibilities. And as a new teacher, it's important for you to share that list and share all those things that you have to do on a daily basis with your administrator. How can you, or how do you, I guess, as a administrator, find ways to support your band and your band program, being busy yourselves with all these after-school activities and all of these extra responsibilities that come with the job of the band director?
So I as a former band director, I'm very careful, and I tell my band and music teachers in my school that I'm not coming around unless you ask me, because I know it can be awkward to feel like I might be stalking or passing judgment on what they're doing. So I wait for that invitation, but because I feel like I set that up as a former band director, as soon as that invitation comes, I feel obliged to make sure my calendar is clear and I'm there. In fact, I could say about 3 or 4 years ago, here at Fort Dorchester High School, I went out to a marching band rehearsal, and I was helping adjust some drill and trying to prove a point. And next thing you know, I took the bass drum off of one of these strapping young teenagers, and I put the bass drum on and started lunging forward on this extended step size to get to the spot I needed to get to. and I got this Charlie horse cramp in the back of my leg.
Oh, oh,
It was terrible. I had not stretched or done anything that somebody of my age and experience should have known to do, and it was a bad scene. But I get out there and I'm not afraid, and I think each year I try to make sure I at least do that once in a marching band rehearsal. The kids that haven't seen that are maybe freshmen or new to the band, to realize that the principal can come out there and actually get on the ground and help run marching band rehearsal and tech a section in the marching band. They find that amazing. I often will also substitute if I've got a coverage issue with my band for a concert band situation, or even with chorus, orchestra, whatnot in my school. I'll often go in and cover a class if the teacher's got to be out for a period or so. They'll ask and we'll set it up, and I'll know what they're rehearsing, and I'll get my score, get a baton, and I'll go in there and actually rehearse the band, which doesn't happen when the director's out. And so they think it's kind of cool that their principal can do in and do that. So it's super important, to me to be able to do that. I would imagine, it's going to be different maybe for somebody that doesn't have my band directing experience to step in and do that.
Mm.
For me, those extracurriculars are celebrations. You're seeing students at their best, and they want to show what they have learned to whoever comes, whether it's community members, family members, friends. I'm always impressed when I go to the arts, and it's not just whoever is participating in that activity there. There's students come out like gangbusters here to support their peers. And for me as a principal, like I'm first and foremost here for students. And so, I really enjoy interacting with the adults, but I'm really here for the kids. Like I want to support them and, hear the great things they're not only doing now, but the great things they're going to do after high school. And that's one of those times I really get to do that, like walking up to the stage and giving them a high five and saying, great job, or, I love that solo. You killed that. Like, I mean, those are moments that you just don't get a lot in the lunchroom, or, and sometimes kids are like kind of excited that you notice that they're in a thing and that it's celebrated, and it's hard to do that if you walk into their math classroom and you really want to just be like, hey, let's just chat about what's going on in life. Most educators, really want to make sure that their curriculum's covered. So that's one of those opportunities you can have with the students and with the people they bring, whether it's their grandparents and their parents, or, other extended family members or guardians. And, I have gotten multiple parents that have said, I've really enjoyed seeing you at insert sporting event, but you also come to the arts events. And I said, yeah, that's because this is important for me, because it's important to those kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to support this just as much as I want to support those athletic events.
I don't think it's any secret that administrators, along with people like band directors and other arts, performing arts, and coaches, those are some people that really do pull very long hours and are some of the busiest people in the school system. Scott, you're still at school now. And again, I appreciate you doing this. And as we record this, it's 8:00 at night. And Tripp, you said you just got home.
Yes.
Do you think it's okay for a band director to say to their administrator, listen, I know you've been busy. I know that you've been every night after school at some sort of function. If you don't want to come to the concert, it's not going to hurt my feelings. Or if you don't want to come to this certain event that the band is doing, I get it. Go home and spend time with your family.
I'm not going to give you a straight answer, but I would say that, I think as a band director, you need to work to be in a relationship with your administrator that you even get to have that conversation.
Right.
If you're scared to speak to your administrator, if you never talk, if you only see them when you stand on stage and say, please stand if you're in the audience, you should be like hobnobbing with them before the concert starts. If they're at your concert, you should see them at lunch duty. You should see them, like I said, they're hanging out because they got a basketball game on Friday night and going to be late. They wish somebody would bring them a cheeseburger. You know, having that relationship where you feel like you can comfortably speak to your principal regularly, that makes the conversations you're just talking about just another conversation. Hey
Right.
man, I know you're busy. We got it. If you don't, you were here, last week, and the kids got to see you. You're good. If you need to go, I think that happens. But a lot of times, I see a lot of teachers, and whether it's band directors or any other teacher, that just they're worried about that relationship, or they're scared to talk to that principal, or they avoid those conver. I mean, we're human. We need human interaction too.
Right.
And for most of our day, I mean, literally, and this sounds terrible, but it's kind of true. Like all the bad stuff that happens in a school day lands at my feet. I deal
Hmm.
with everything bad that happened that day. And I just hope every morning when I get up and look in the mirror and psych myself up to go to school, I hope that something good is going to land at my feet too,
Right.
because I know everything bad is going to. And so, be the person that builds that relationship and invites those good opportunities. I mean, you set the stage and prepare for those opportunities to celebrate by building those relationships.
Well, and for me, Andrew, that I mean, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing to say. I know when I've not been available to do something, I hope you feel like I've just said, hey, I have class today. I need help. I'm going to be at Western. I really need some help. I mean, when it was the Christmas parade, and I was like, I'm at Western, and if I miss class, I have to write a 10-page paper. I'm not writing an extra 10-page paper on top of the like 30 other 10-page paper that the doctoral program is asking me to write.
Right.
And so I would hope, kind of like Tripp said, that relationship's there. I mean, I'm not, I doubt I'll ever go, Andrew, I really just want to go home and, like sit on the couch, put on my PJs. I mean, yeah,
Right.
we all want to do that. Like we're human. Like,
Right.
we all have long days, I'm sure Tripp is like me. I'm one of the first people in the door in the morning, and oftentimes one of the last, if not the last person to leave.
Right.
I also signed up for this. Like, this was not like no one forced me into this job. It like held me at knife point and said, "You'll do this, or we're going to take your house." I mean, I want to see those successes, and as I stand on top of all the bad stuff Tripp talked about, I want to celebrate the great stuff. And
Right.
band concerts and performances in the community are definitely those things.
All right. Let's move on to our next question. What is your biggest pet peeve about teachers or specifically band directors, if you wish? What is something that they could do to make their lives better as a teacher and to make your life easier as an administrator?
I could really quickly say, as long as that relationship is formed, don't assume intent. So my intent in anything I ask a staff member to is not to get them or to make their life harder or, be a villain. It is either like, hey, this is something that could help students, or this is just something that needs to be done. But then if I am asking somebody to do something that's just not feasible or creates a life change that is not good, I need them to communicate that with me. I remember I asked a teacher years ago. I had just put her on the morning duty list. I'm sure Tripp's the same in the summer when I'm making those duty lists. I really try to do my absolute best to make sure that they are, the best for people's schedules. And I'd accidentally put, a mom who had to drop her kid off in preschool on the morning duty list. And they came in and said, like, are you trying to get my kid kicked out of preschool? And I said, what are you talking about? And they explained, I said, I'm sorry, let's switch it right now. Oh, I know this other person won't mind. Let's just switch it right now. And they were like, oh, you didn't do that intentionally? I said, no, my goal is not to make your life harder. It's to enable you to be the best educator you can. So that is just something I'm not making rules. I'm not sitting in my office stirring my cauldron and, hoping for the worst. I'm trying to do things to make our school and our students successful. And if that has an unintentional negative effect, come tell me. Let's see if we can work it out.
I would say a pet peeve for me, probably unique to my situation. I write a morning email to my staffalty, we call them. My staffalty gets a morning email from me every day. It's personalized each day. I'll give them information about what might be happening if we've got testing or any kind of event or whatnot happening during the day. If there's any district paperwork that they should be turning in or that they're responsible for, or grades are due, those types of things, upcoming calendar events. I'll usually end with maybe some links to tweets or other articles or things that I see online that happen to pertain to teaching or what I feel like might be important to them, or maybe I want to raise a question and get them to think about something. I'll throw something out about something controversial about grading or whatever, just to get people thinking and talking, and doing that stuff. And I ask that the staff read that every day. I mean, I kind of feel like as a salaried professional, we're not punching a clock to the minute. You need to get into work and have enough time to put your stuff down, get your coffee, whatever your routine is, and read my morning email before you get going, because it's going to tell you important stuff. If you need to pick up your W-2 before 11 o'clock today, you need to read that in the morning. So before 11 o'clock, you can scoot by the office, grab your W-2 from the secretary. And it's a pet peeve of mine when people feel that they're too busy to keep up with that minor ask. And I'm very overt about saying, like, at the beginning of the year, this is something I expect. I don't ask much of you. I'm going to try to keep everything off your plate. But one thing that helps me is knowing that you're going to get a morning email from me every day that we have school, and it's going to give you important information. It's not just for my ego. It gives you important information, answers your questions, prepares you, to do this. And I mean, it's an hour of my morning routine to make sure that I'm up plenty early to have that email there. My teachers are supposed to arrive at school at 8 o'clock for a 9:30 start with students, which is crazy. I know they have 90 minutes before students enter their room. And I make sure that email is in their inbox by 8 o'clock every morning. And so it is a pet peeve of mine if people can't read that email and then miss out on something important. So if
Right.
your principal gives you, the non-negotiables or the things that they really expect, try to do that. There's probably a reason that they're asking that. Kind of like Scott was saying, nothing's just to make your life harder. We're trying to probably make your life easier.
Right.
You might be making it harder by not living up to our expectation there. You're making it hard on yourself.
Yeah. I think in the past 16 years of my career, I can say that has been the biggest source of conflict that I have seen between teachers and administrative teams. Just the communication aspect, and or in some cases, the lack of communication. If teachers are not doing their job in reading, or administrators aren't doing their job in sending information to the staff, it causes some major issues. Not only do staff appreciate being communicated with on a regular basis and being kept up to date on everything that goes on, but administrators appreciate the fact that teachers take the time to read that and to take seriously what they're saying and to put it into action. I know as a band director, when I send things to my students or when I talk to them in class about something and it goes in one ear and out the other, or they never read it, it's very frustrating and things get missed. And it's the same for for an administrator to teachers.
Definitely. And like Tripp said, look, I am not the biggest fan of emails. I think that we get too many of them as it is.
Yeah.
But those simple expectations, one email a day, there's nothing wrong with that, or, a weekly newsletter, because we're not putting things in there for our own amusement. I legitimately want people to know when a concert is, when an after school event, and then if they can come, that's awesome. I mean, how cool is it when kids see their teachers in the audience? Like, they notice. And I'm gonna be honest, I notice. Like, I love seeing teachers come to that kind of stuff because it's shown they support the kids. And how many times when I ask them, "Oh, I'm so glad to see you here," they're like, "I had to come see Johnny play the French horn. I promised him I would come." And it just shows that, teacher-student relationship and how pivotal and important it is to that continued student success and that kid coming to school.
Yeah.
Along those lines, Scott, I think something that a lot of times gets missed because we've all admitted on the podcast tonight that the band directors are really busy. They've got all of these events going on. They're doing this stuff. And Scott just talked about when somebody shows up at the band concert to see the French horn, to see the kid play his French horn. But, it means the world to the baseball player that's in your band when you show up
Mm-hmm.
at the baseball game as the band
Mm-hmm.
director. And a lot of times we miss that. And I think, I would maybe not even think about it, would certainly give a pass because I know the band director was busy and had rehearsals and all the other things. But that's a two-way street, just like when the kids get so excited when they're sitting on stage with their band and they see their history teacher out in the audience. When their band director shows up to some other activity they're involved in or can comment on that, that goes a long way in that relationship piece too. It's huge. You just got to remember to do it from all sides, and it pays super dividends.
Right. And as a young band director, I have to admit that was something that took me a while to learn because my focus was on, preparing the next concert and preparing this piece for the performance that's coming up or making sure that this child is ready for their audition that's coming up. And so it took me a while to realize that, these kids, whereas they love music and they enjoy what they're doing, they may not love it as much as I do. And they have things that they do outside of band that mean a lot to them. And it really means a lot for you as the director to be there to support them outside of the band room as well.
I completely understand. I've walked in band director's shoes, how busy the band director is, but stepping back and getting that global view of everything that's going on in the school community and what's happening and understanding that the school doesn't revolve around the band room. The
Right.
band is part of the whole school, and having that understanding is very often difficult for band directors to wrap their head around because there's so much consuming them in their band job. But that's important, and I think especially when you start talking about maybe an administrator that doesn't understand band or seemingly doesn't value band like you wish they did, you'll gain points with them when you show that you are invested in the whole school. You're part of the bigger team. You're not
Right.
expecting everything to bow down to your band program.
Exactly.
Well, and let me give you one more reality nugget too. We talked about my wife Alice, who's a band director. She's been doing this for 35 years now. This past weekend, she went to a neighboring school district and did their all-county band. She was clinician for that. She does a lot of clinician and adjudication work. Is former president of the North Carolina Bandmasters Association. She's got a pretty extensive resume. I mean, she's a heck of a band director. Um, the thing she did that meant the most and got her the most praise was even though she was conducting the all-county band this past weekend, at the middle school where she works, she told her principal, "Sure, the band will play at the pep rally you want to have on Wednesday."
Mm-hmm.
I've been in so many situations where the middle school band director said, "Oh yeah, we don't play at pep rallies. That's like a high school thing. We don't know any pep music. We can't do that. We don't have a drum line. There's 1,000 excuses why you can't do it." And
Right.
now, to be honest with you, Alice has done this 35 years. The first 20, I'm not sure that she realized the magic that was in saying yes to the pep rally or taking the middle school band out to play at the middle school football game.
Right.
And she wrote teaches them. I mean, her music education professors are probably rolling over in their graves. She wrote teaches them some silly little songs that they think are cool. They come in with melodies they want to hear, and they figure it out and they write it on the board and learn these melodies that they play in unison. But they think the greatest thing set to a little drum beat that the drummers played, and they play that pep rally, and everybody in the school instantly thinks Alice should be teacher of the year. And that was
Right.
the least important musical thing for music education that she did
Right.
for kids. But the mileage she gets out of that, and not just what her administrators and what her colleagues think, but the kids, they have a blast. Most of them they were band nerds. They never stayed at the football game, and they went to the football game and they had a good time and they danced and they cheered and they played, and everybody came by and spoke to them and was excited they were there. And again, she's queen of the school for the next 6 months now because she played at the pep rally this week.
Right.
That's huge.
Absolutely.
And same thing goes for high school directors that hate doing a parade. I remember
Yeah.
Craig when we moved to Morehead City, and took over at Croatan High School, Alice and I had the attitude that we really hated doing a parade. Many high school directors hate to do a parade, and everybody loves a parade unless you're a band director or in the band, and you march all these parades, and you think, man, this is really a drag. It's not the most fun thing I've ever done. But Craig made the point, like, this is the biggest audience that's going to see your band in the community. The people that are going to support you, put money into your fundraisers, do all the things in your community. The biggest groups you're going to see is when your band plays at graduation for high school and when your band marches in the parades. And in Carteret County, where we were at Croatan High School, there were 5 different Christmas parades that happened in that one county, all over in all the little townships. And we did 5 Christmas parades every year.
Wow.
And I've got tips if anybody wants to reach out to make your parade stuff better. But we learned that having a great performance, I mean, Craig rolled out and he had all new costumes on in the parade and special flags. And we just rolled in and whatever we wore for our fall marching band show, And he was like, oh no. And he got a banner that was all sequined on his banner and the marching front. And we were like, how can you justify spending money on this stuff? This is what's important. And he said, oh, it's the most important because this is what most of the people in the community think your band is what you should parade. And so it goes along the same lines, not just the middle school example I gave, but along those same lines, making sure that you are nailing it at your graduation performance, that you're nailing it when you do parades. I can remember, like I said, Craig, he had rifles and sabers all down the side of the band and flags everywhere. And we got to a point we started doing double swing flags in the parade. And people thought that was the most beautiful thing they had seen. And it was the simplest, easy routine. And we figured out that our Veterans Day parade material and our Christmas parade material, they could do the exact same flag routine. And we used the same one every year. And we taught it to all the kids in the garden. It became super easy to prep and dust up and make look good. We just changed the flags from red, white, and blue to red and green. And they did the double swing flags and we put them all in front of the band. So you hear music coming down and all you see are sheets of material flying around on the street. And everybody started to say, wow, that Croatan band, that's great. Look at them. And it was big. And it's, having that awareness and getting out of your little hole where you're stuck in what's musically important and what you wrote about in your music education essays in college, like step back and take a look at the big picture of the whole school community. And it can make a huge difference.
All right, and now it's time for questions from you, our listeners. This portion of our show is sponsored by Aldredge. Aldredge is a platform for managing any audition process from the classroom to a region or state event, from invitations, registration, billing, and messaging, all the way through the judging, scoring, tabulation, analysis, and wrap-up reports. Aldredge can help you have a successful audition process. For more information, check out their website at audish.app. That's audish.app. So before I began recording episodes of this show, I did send topics of discussions that we would be covering on the show to undergraduate and pre-service teachers, as well as young band directors who have just gotten into the classroom and may need some help. If you're one of those people and you need some advice or you have a question you'd like to ask, please feel free to send that to the bandofficepodcast@gmail.com. Or you can also find us on Instagram at bandofficepodcast. And feel free to slide into those DMs with your questions. All right, so this question comes from Mr. Keenan Boswell, a junior music education major at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. And Keenan would like to know, what is the best way to resolve a conflict between athletics and a band director and an administrator, specifically when an administrator is a fan of athletics and maybe doesn't support the arts in the same form or fashion? Now, when I read this question, I immediately started thinking about experiences that I've personally had, and I can think of one that's fairly recent when there was a student who is a star basketball player, and she's also the only bari sax player in the ensemble, and a concert which is scheduled a year in advance happens to be the same night as a basketball game that was only scheduled maybe a couple of weeks ago or rescheduled because of an unforeseen issue. And the coach says, well, I'm sorry, if you miss this game, you're benched. So, what would your advice be in that situation or a situation similar to that?
Um, what does the student value? I think that's a big part, and because it's like you said, if they're the singular tuba player and they have a pickleball match that has been, just on the books for the season, but without them, like that, the band is going to crumble. Like I think it's for me, it's some negotiations between the two. Now, if I was just like it's it's all athletics and the arts, those kids just need to stay in the corner and be quiet. If I was a band director, I'd go to that principle and probably couch it something in terms of wins and losses. I mean, and isn't that what most athletic directors and coaches want? They want, not only do they want to do well and show growth, but realistically they're really measured on wins and losses. So if the band director could kind of couch it in those terms, like if our tuba player's not there, we're going to take an L, and that looks bad on our entire school because we've got North Snuffberry or whoever that they're going to break us across the goals. But if we bring that trophy home, like you've got some bragging rights in the region because we took everybody to court. And unfortunately, that tuba player is a big link in that. Just like I know they're a big link in the pickleball team, but this is one game, and we've had this on the books for about 18 months. I need your support.
It's funny that you mentioned that. I jokingly said to my class today that I was going to be the new head coach of our Brevard High School pickleball team.
I'm in. I'm in.
Okay.
So I think with this one again, this is a preemptive strike. Obviously what Scott said is exactly right, and once you find yourself in that situation, that's probably your way through it. But I think the most important thing again is building that relationship with your administrators. If you have an athletic director as well, being able to have a sit down and a talk, and the explanation
Hmm.
that there's not really a bench with this performance for the band. If this person's not here, there's nobody standing in the wings to take their place. And I realize the value to your team, but when you have a season of, 20 basketball games versus our one winter concert, there's a difference here. And, I would couch it as well that I think we can all agree we don't want the child to feel like they're stuck in the middle or that they're disappointing any
Right.
of us. We want to protect that for that child. And so, what are our thoughts up front? And so that's where it's very important maybe to expand this conversation and talk about when you're doing scheduling of your fine and performing arts events in your school. Like, is there an administrator that comes to the table that knows about that calendar? Does your arts department come up with their calendar the spring of the preceding year for the entire next year? Does an administrator sign off or acknowledge that this is what we're doing? Do you have the athletic director involved in terms of giving schedules or likely athletic schedules so we can show that we're trying to work around things and make that happen? And it comes in that communication and setting it up and like, hey, we're the adults. Let's sit down and talk about this before we have
Hmm.
a problem in April. Let's talk about it from the beginning of the year. What would we do if something happened, and how can we try to not force a situation like that to happen with doing that? And again, that's just building that relationship and being able to talk to your administrator and get that, and to make friends with your athletic director. I remember when Alice and I moved, Scotland High School has a very strong football tradition, very strong athletic
Hmm.
school, and we expected to be at football every Friday night with the marching band and that type of thing. And I remember when we first moved to Croatan High School, the new job together, and we were talking to Lee Davis, our athletic director, talking to Lee about something. And Alice said something about the football stadium, just in the middle of a sentence. And he's like, what did you just say? He interrupted her, and she's like, what do you mean? He said, what did you just say? And he said, you called it the football stadium. She said, yeah. He said, it's not the football stadium, it's the stadium. We play football in there. The marching band performs in there. The soccer team plays in there. We do all kinds of things in the stadium. It doesn't just belong to football. And that may be a unique perspective for an athletic director, but it kind of framed that for me. It's
Hmm.
not all about one thing. He was about all kids, And again, I feel like I keep coming back to that theme, for advice to band directors is be about the whole school community, not just
Right.
the program. And then if you are that way, it's much easier for you to project that or expect that of other people in the school, whether they're athletic minded or, quiz bowl or robotics or whatever their thing is. Like, are we all in a community and we're all, at my school, we're all patriots. That's our mascot. We're all on the same team ultimately.
That's some really great advice. And as a new band director, that should be one of the very first things you do. Get to know your athletic director, get to know your coaches, form those relationships because ultimately that's what this is all about. To finish out our program today, I have just one final question for you, and that is if you could leave our audience with one final nugget, one valuable lesson that you have learned throughout your career in education, or if you could think back to a mentor that really meant something to you, that you learned a lesson from, that you feel like is important to share with others, what would that be?
I'm going to talk about Mr. Heron. He was my middle school band director. He's the one at the beginning of our conversation I said moved me from trumpet to baritone in my 7th grade year. And he, if memory serves me correctly, was about 4 foot tall, but all 4 feet were pure, intense, caring fury. And I mean that in a kind, loving, and compassionate way. But he really continually gave clear and explicit expectations, and he had, at the time, I thought way too high an expectation. I just remember, like, not only like learning the chromatic scales and learning how to read music, but just spending days on tone and pitch. And in the infinite wisdom of being a 12-year-old, I was like, this guy has no idea what he's talking about. But I kept on going year in and year out. Even now when I play musical instruments, I think of, like, intonation and phrasing, that like he really planted that seed, and he had a deep enough pedagogical knowledge, but also the patience of Job to like instill that in us and keep at it, even though we were a bunch of middle school students. And anyone that's ever dealt with middle school students knows that they are a unique bunch, and they can be both infuriating and also endearing simultaneously. But
Right.
I just really have always appreciated those lessons he taught me. His son was also in the same class I was. Great, great, great trumpet player. And just getting to see him as both a dad and a band director. And we would always give Chuck, his son, a hard time because he never caught a break. But it was really good to see that those expectations were not just there for, all us other kids. They were there for the one that literally goes home with them.
That's great.
And so, similarly, the person I want to talk about is Mark Johnson. He was my high school band director. Unfortunately, Mark passed away a few months ago, and I attended his funeral. And at the funeral, we had some people speak from the era when he was a high school band director, also from his time as a college and community band director in Savannah, where he spent the latter portion of his life. Never got to know his daughter. He had a child later in life after he had moved on, and so had only kind of heard about her from a distance, but obviously got to hear from his daughter and family friends about what a loving father he was and all of those things. But I think for me, I look back on my career, my life, where I've landed, and I really feel like I can trace it all back to what I learned and what I experienced in my high school band. And so I would say this as a cautionary notice to any band directors listening. You just never know the influence you're having on a young person's life, and the depth of the relationship you will build as an involved band director. It's unique compared to most other teaching positions, and in a high school, for instance, you're not going to teach this child for just one semester like most teachers do. You're going to teach that child for all 8 semesters, we hope, all the way through. You're going to know their siblings' names. You're going to know their parents' names. You're probably going to have all of their cell phone numbers in your phone. You've traveled with them, you've done all of these things and built really deep relationships that are meaningful. But some of the things that Mr. Johnson, Mr. J, we called him, instilled in me that have made me a better leader. Just understanding the push that he put behind what we were doing. We had a fantastic grade 6 high school band. We were working on a shoestring budget and doing a marching band, but we're wildly successful with that. And he pushed all of us to be better than we believed we could be, or understood that we could be. And he was always there driving that and pushing that. And he instilled in us the importance of showing up. I would have never missed a performance or even a rehearsal for that matter, just because I wouldn't have wanted to disappoint Mr. J by not being there. And so I worked so hard, and those skills and those traits that were instilled in me through that are the traits that I feel like make me a good employee now. I'm going to be honest, when I'm looking, going back to where Scott started this whole conversation with the importance of our job in hiring people, I want to find people that I know had a great band experience. I get in those conversations, and in fact, we hired a young lady to teach as a special needs teacher at my school this past year. And I got on the interview and I found out she was from Centerville, Ohio. Centerville, Ohio, they have an amazing band program at Centerville High School. And I immediately wanted to find out, was she involved with the band program? Because that was going to sign the deal, not just because I'm a band guy, but because I knew she understood and she had a special spark because she had been through that.
Right.
So I just think that's huge to know that you can have that influence on somebody. Mr. Johnson had that influence on me. And honestly, all the grad school, all the classes, all the professional development I've done, none of it was as important or foundational as what I learned in my high school band.
Well, gentlemen, it's been a pleasure having you on, and I do appreciate you taking the time to do this. And before you go, just want to say thank you for all that you do as an administrator. I know that many of us in education know that sometimes it can feel like a thankless job, and so I do want to take an opportunity to say thank you and let you know that when we have a good administrator like you gentlemen, it not only makes a difference in our schools, but it makes a difference to our students and in our band programs and ultimately in our communities. So thank you both so much for what you do. And again, thank you for joining us here tonight.
Absolutely. Thanks for the invitation. It's my pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us for this first episode of The Band Office. We truly hope that you find your way back to us each week to find words of advice and encouragement that will help you have a more successful time in your classroom as a music educator. This podcast is sponsored by the North Carolina chapter of the National Band Association. Theme music is written and performed by the Westerlies.